Good morning and welcome to day 3 of the 2021 virtual ISS R&D conference. We're all very glad you could join us. I'm Jennifer Scott Williams, manager of the Applications Client Support Office at NASA, and it is my pleasure to be your MC for today's event. We have a jam-packed day of business, STEM, and fun, so I hope you're ready. We'll start the day with an important and timely panel moderated by Sven Emma that includes small business innovation research leaders from across the government. Shortly after, Emmy-nominated science TV host Emily Calandrelli will moderate our next panel. In between those two panels, we set aside some time from 11 to 11:30 Eastern for you to visit our sponsors' virtual booths, if you haven't had a chance to do that yet. When you visit a booth, you will be automatically enrolled for a special giveaway of an Oculus Quest 2 VR headset, complete with access to the Emmy-nominated ISS Experience Episodes 1 and 2, created and generously provided by our partners, Felix and Paul Studios. You'll also receive an ISS Above device that lets you know where the ISS is at any time. You got to play to win, so make sure you hit the virtual exhibit hall at some point before the end of the day. To give you a sneak peek at what you could win, here's a trailer from Felix and Paul Studios for ISS Experience Episode 2.
Jerry, when did you start lobbying to get women into the space program, or was it always a part of NASA's idea?
I think it's always been a part of their thinking that eventually we will put women into space.
50 years ago, there was another pilot with the same talents and the same passion that I have. I feel a very kindred spirit with her. One of the significant things that I think about is not that I am one of the first women to be able to do this, but that I am simply one of the first allowed to do so.
This is the moving forward part of what we do as humanity. Together, we're exploring, and that's an important reason why we even have a space station and a space program.
At the end of exploration, we will come back to the place that we started, and we will truly know the place for the first time.
Isn't that awesome? I need to get that Oculus. Let me go ahead and go to that virtual booth. All right, thank you to Felix and Paul Studios. We want to again thank the Boeing Company for serving as this year's platinum sponsor, as they have for the previous 9 ISS R&D conferences. We are so glad they could be a part of our conference again this year. We'd also like to thank our silver sponsors, Airbus, KBR, Leidos, Northrop Grumman, Sierra Space, Space Tango, Teledyne Brown Engineering, as well as the Engineering and Innovative Technology Development Team at the University of Alabama in Birmingham, or UAB. Special thanks to our other exhibitors, Jacobs, Oceaneering, and TechShot. Guess where you can connect with all of our sponsors and exhibitors? Yes, in the virtual exhibit hall. I'm gonna say that a few times just until you get it. Before we begin with our first panel, here are a few housekeeping reminders. First, all attendees are muted. If you would like to ask a question of a speaker or panelist member, please use the Q&A space on the right side of your screen. We will answer as many questions as time permits. If you have any technical issues during the day, please reach out for help by calling country code 1-833-374-1392. Okay, we're getting pretty close here, so let's get started with the day's first session, SBIRs in Space, Multi-Agency Perspectives and Trends. Moderating this panel is Sven Enma, Director for Investment and Economic Analysis at the ISS National Lab, where he leads the organization's economic analysis of companies and flight projects across a broad range of disciplines and industries to optimize the use of the ISS National Lab's resources. He also leads the organization's expanding engagement with the investor community. Prior to joining the ISS National Lab, Sven led U.S. industrial and clean technologies equity research at Stifel Financial and served for over 16 years as an equity analyst and investment banker with leading Wall Street firms in New York and San Francisco, advising investors and companies across emerging sectors of energy, industrial, telecommunications, and technology industries, as well as working on financing and strategic transactions that raised over $12 billion of capital. Sven received his MBA in Finance and Strategy from the Yale School of Management and graduated with a Bachelor of Science summa cum laude from Indiana Wesleyan University. Sven, the floor is yours.
Great. Thanks so much, Jennifer, for the kind introduction, and welcome everybody to day 3 of ISSRDC. It's great to have you all here. And so the following panel we're starting here is it's a very important topic, and it's a very valuable discussion in terms of funding small business innovation via federal SBIR programs, STTR programs, and targeted research announcements. Such funding programs provide billions of dollars every year in the United States to enterprises and small entities, both to drive toward the federal research goals as well as to drive commercialization. And as we've seen at ISS National Lab, this is very, very valuable. Space is still expensive, and it takes resources to de-risk some of the technology development and R&D, and that will help to pave the way, in many cases, to driving private capital engagement in the industry. So that's very important. And so with that brief introduction, I'd like to invite our panelists to the stage. I'd like to welcome Jason Kessler. Jason is the program executive for NASA Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transfer programs, and brings to us over 15 years of experience with NASA, senior advisory work with Global Innovation Initiative, as well as rich entrepreneurial and startup experience. And next, I'd like to invite Dr. Murali Nair, who is Program Director in the National Science Foundation SBIR STTR program, and is responsible for topic areas such as robotic technology, wireless technology, Internet of Things, space technology. In addition to award-winning work at NSF, he has extensive experience with satellite and telecommunications industries and has founded and led an international wireless product company. And last but not least, greatly appreciate Dr. William Carter from Defense Science Office of DARPA joining us. Dr. Carter is a program manager at the Defense Science Office and formerly director of Materials and Microsystems Laboratory at HRL Laboratories. He's author and co-author of over 40 referred publications and issued over 100 issued patents here. So thank you all for joining us. Welcome, Jason, Murali, and Bill. We'll start with a few questions from my side and then to the audience Q&A. And as Jennifer mentioned, for audience, there is a Q&A function on the screen, so please submit your questions from there. So just to kind of kick it off here, let's provide an overview to our audience in terms of the programs you work on. And maybe I'll start with Jason here, then to Murali, and then to Bill.
Super. Thank you so much, Sven. Great to be on this panel with the great doctors, Nair and Carter, and so happy to be invited. I was reflecting as I prepared for this. I joined NASA back in 1994 in the Legislative Affairs Office, the year after Space Station won by a single vote in Congress, and dedicated a couple of years of my life to try to ensure that the space station was actually funded. So here we are today. Also was able to attend in Kazakhstan the first Element launch of ISS. So I have a long history and love affair with the program and the effort. And so pleased to be back at NASA now, running the SBIR and STTR programs. And what I'm particularly excited about, the NASA SBIR and STTR programs is pretty unique in that we are deriving technology needs from our subject matter experts within the agency, matching that up with small business capability. And when the program's desire is to try to commercialize and see private sector success. Because the NASA market isn't always as big as some of our sister agencies, that can be a challenge. When we look at aeronautics, there's clearly great opportunity there because there's a strong terrestrial marketplace. The other place I look to is ISS and in-space production. And so as I've started to get familiar with the multitude of opportunities within the NASA SBIR and STTR portfolios, I keep circling around the national lab utilization and the opportunity to really start to de-risk the technology that can be so challenging in that microgravity environment, and actually see really good either terrestrial benefit or improved in-space capabilities. And so for me, the partnership with the ISS program and NASA's SBIR STTR programs is particularly robust because of that dual capability of not only de-risking technology for the NASA mission, but also at the same time looking to really seed private sector success.
This is great, Jason. Murali, in terms of NSF, there is obviously, this is one of the very long-lasting SBIR programs, and it is, I found a lot of areas, different areas. How does space fit into the mix there, and what are you focusing on? Tell us a little bit about the program.
Okay, thank you, Sven, and thank you, everybody, for allowing me to be a part of this panel today. This is my first experience with the ISS R&D conference. And to tell you a little bit about what we do at NSF within the NSF SBIR STTR program, Sven sort of alluded to that. It was the first SBIR program in the country. It was started, SBIR started at NSF. There was a pilot in 78, 79. And then the law was passed in 1980. The SBIR law was passed in 1980. So we've been doing this for quite a while, more than 40 years now. And I came to the program almost 20 years ago. Not quite, but it will be 20, about a year or so. So it was a very different program then, in the sense that we were funding companies, small companies, of course, but they've been coming to the trough every few years, the same old companies and so on. More than, I think, 30 or 40% of the portfolio of companies that we were funding were this kind of company that is just simply living on grants for the entire lifetime of the company. But now, over the last 20 years or so, it has changed dramatically in the sense that we focus now on companies that come to us the first time, and they never come back. Usually they never come back unless it calls for, when there's reason for it. In some technologies like robotics, for example, maybe even space, that we haven't had much experience with the space area. It takes a while, and so we see that, and then sometimes we may fund it, same company twice. That's about it. Otherwise, the whole business model has changed over the years. The other unique part of NSF, the NSF program, is that I think for the most part now it's mostly startup companies. It's just one or two people starting up the company, and like I said, they once they get a phase 1, phase 2, and so on, they don't usually come back. Just to give you a point of a data point, is that we just found out that in July, the month of July of this year, our companies raised a total of 1.3 billion just in the month of July from private capital. So the focus has always been like, we are not a customer, like NASA might be a customer, DOD may be a customer, and so on. So it's all grants. And so we don't buy anything from any of these companies that we fund. So that's very unique about NSF. And then talking about space, so we haven't, like I said, too much experience with it because it's only started about, let's say, 3 years ago. So we're just getting into it, trying to figure out strategy in the space area. And I can talk more about it as we go on in the panel, but I think I'll stop there to give Bill a chance to jump in.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks, Murali. And Bill, obviously DARPA has done some very exciting things in space and continues to do so, but interested to hear your perspective.
Thanks very much, Sven. Well, first off, thank you so much for having me on the panel. Hopefully you can hear me okay. And great to meet my fellow panelists here. So really, this is sort of the moment where we do something completely different on the panel. DARPA is a very different agency than NSF or NASA, and really pretty much any other agency. Unlike a lot of organizations, we have program managers who stay very short periods of time. My tenure at DARPA will probably be about 4 years, and that's considered to be a feature, not a bug of the agency. We're looking to really disrupt and change how things are done. To that extent, the agency is very much driven by the program managers. And so at any given time, the interest in space is highly dependent on who happens to be at the agency. Now, myself, I'm very interested in space. I just put out a program on manufacturing in space. And there's several components of the program. It's going to be kind of a big effort, taking Earth-derived feedstock and manufacturing very low mass density structures on orbit, or perhaps looking at deriving feedstock from the moon and asking what can be done there. What is the art of the possible? And then finally rewriting the rules of design for space. But in terms of the SBIR program, this is highly dependent again on the program managers who are at DARPA. But there's some interesting global perspective that the agency has taken. The first is to look at SBIR programs seriously as a way to spur innovation. And we've put together a program called the Embedded Entrepreneur Program, which is probably different than most other agencies, where we are able to, in select cases, actually hire a serial entrepreneur of some kind and embed them with a company for a long period of time. So I wanted to make sure, for the duration, I wanted to make sure to get that across, that it is kind of a different place to work and a different place to engage around SBIRs. Back over to you.
Well, this is super interesting, and kind of going a little bit deeper here. Sounds like you all have kind of different way that topic areas comes about. From Bill, as you just mentioned, on the DARPA side, it's relatively short duration, but would like to hear a little more from Jason's side here on how I think there's around 24 or so topic areas, how those evolve, how they come about, and like how do they change, and how do you guys balance the internal NASA needs versus the external kind of ability to gauge the tool functionality, I guess.
Yep, great. We are a program that sits within the Space Technology Mission Directorate. So NASA has 4 program mission directorates. And one might think that we focus solely on space technology because that's where we sit, but we are actually an agency level program. And so we serve aeronautics, science mission directorate, human exploration and development, as well as space technology. And so I think of our program as a market maker, if you will. We sit between NASA subject matter experts and small business capability and create a solicitation that is sourcing the needs of our technology experts, program and project folks, and the small businesses that then apply to that solicitation. And so it's bottoms up driven. We connect with all the NASA field centers as well, because that's where ultimately the work happens. And depending on the either administration focus or the agency focus, there'll be some modifications in that. So you might recognize, if you're a follower of the program, that there has been a focus on Mars and Moon. And so as the Artemis program spun up, there was the ability to develop and target technologies around supporting the Artemis mission. There has been a consistent and long-term effort in space production, working with the ISS program, continual work on sensor technologies to support all of Science Mission Directorate. So we really run the gamut of the entire agency, and put out this annual solicitation, which we're actually in development right now. So to your point, we have the 24 focus areas. Not exactly sure where we'll land for January, but expect it to be somewhat similar. You can see trends if you actually go to the web and look at NASA SBIR focus areas. You can see a slight shift over time, but not great. Our solicitation will come out in January, and we're in the process working with our Mission Directorate technology experts on figuring out what are their challenges, and then we as a program figure out, okay, this is what the NASA technical need, this is what realistically we think would be doable by small business, and then collectively create a solicitation that will, again, hit the street in January for folks to propose and then compete for awards through our program.
Oh, that's very helpful. And as Bill mentioned, there is also, from their perspective, there is the entrepreneurial focus now coming on board. But sounds like there is also kind of very earlier stage and fundamental focus, as you referred to Nomad program. So how did the Nomad program come about, and what was the driver behind it?
That's interesting. Well, I can give some context. I'm in the Defense Sciences Office, and so that's why you're hearing me talk about very fundamental things. But there's 6 offices at DARPA. Another office is the Tactical Technologies Office, and historically, that's where most of the work in space has been done. You know, from the Blackjack program through to programs today like robotic servicing of geosynchronous satellites, RSGS. And they are finding, I think, that they need to pull on kind of farther term technologies. So, you know, their goal, the TTO office's goal, is to go and put together, you know, relatively mature capabilities and go demonstrate them. And so a TRL-3 technology is never going to make it onto their roadmap. So that's more or less how the Nomad program got going. Is I have a bunch of buddies in that office, and we got together and said, okay, how can we really disrupt the status quo and give ourselves an advantage in space that hopefully will be enduring? And that's where we came up with the idea of going after manufacturing very large structures, very low mass density structures. Having said that, you know, there's obviously lots of other work going on across both the civil and the commercial worlds, and so we've put together a program that hopefully is, you know, kind of compatible and complementary to those. You know, looking at issues that really are specific to the DoD. Like, it gives you a sense.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great. That's great. We are obviously very excited about the in-space manufacturing area and the ability to build the kind of broader infrastructures and contribute to that from our lab side. And following up on that kind of the focus area discussion, Murali mentioned before that there is obviously they've been involved in space for the last kind of 3 years. How is and I saw the list on your website in terms of the areas you're focused on, but how they came about, how do you think about the kind of commercial relevance here, you know, in terms of transition to revenue generating entities versus supporting the more kind of fundamental work?
That's a good question. I mean, technologies need to get to scale to be relevant. And I think you know, there should be no argument there. Mm-hmm. And part of the scale that we're looking for is that commercial leverage. But the DoD can be its own market. When we look at things that are just uniquely enabling for the DoD, then we're going to go ahead and spend the money to go do them. But we'd really like to see the civil and commercial worlds pull technologies, more quickly. So I think that is one place where the SBIR program can help. When we've done SBIRs in other areas, I have a couple of great success stories I can tell you, where really the SBIR component of it, it may have had another DARPA program or a parent program, if you wish, kind of driving the base technology development. But then the SBIR effort can enable commercialization. And at least in 2 cases, we've enabled folks to go through FDA approval or to demonstrate sufficient scale and sufficient precision that venture capital or other investors will get attracted, and the leverage can be amazing. For $1 million or $2 million phase 2, you might see $10 to $15 million or more in terms of VC funding.
Yeah, I definitely love to hear success stories, and Jason, please jump in here as well on that front, because I think that will help to kind of crystallize for the audience and like how the what the conversion factor is, and also how you guys measure success. Yeah, in terms of that would be super helpful.
As a program, the primary measure for us is external leverage, because we are working to buy down technology risk. We have our subject matter experts identify the technical gaps or areas that need some attention that potentially small business can address. And so a program where we're partnered with our NASA end user, in this case, the National Lab and ISS. So we're thinking about in-space production. A small business working its way from phase 1, feasibility, is there something there, to prototyping in phase 2, and then we have a number of post-phase 2 activities where we work towards matching funds. We have a commercially focused post-phase 2, and then ultimately the goal getting to phase 3. And so for us as a program, the highest level, most basic measure of success for us is, are our businesses moving through that pipeline, buying down enough technical risk so that they are finding either NASA funding to further their efforts or outside. And to Bill's point, the DoD has the advantage of this tremendous warfighter base that businesses within the SBIR program in DoD have the ability to sell large numbers, potentially if it's the right technology, because there's just a market there. The NASA market is much, much smaller, which makes it challenging. And so we really do need to find the right internal NASA partners that are going to leverage the de-risking that SBIR is doing. And work with, I like to think of it outside the NASA gate. Like, where is the investor community focused? And one of the things that I'm particularly bringing, and I think also to Bill's point about DARPA's success at rotating people through, like, this is my 3rd tour at NASA. So I'm glad to be back in the agency with fresh perspective, because I think our success is going to need to be predicated also on how well we're partnering. Are we ensuring that our solicitation is incentivizing the right behaviors in the marketplace, such that we're not stepping on the toes of private funds, and helping to build the infrastructure that's needed for our space exploration mission? And so, I mean, real quickly, top of mind, you mentioned TechShot as a sponsor of this. Clearly a great SBIR success story. The biofabrication facility, made in space. I mean, when we circle around the ideas of in-space production, and exactly one of the main themes of the conference, I think, like, SBIR has been clearly a great contributor to de-risking for folks to start to manufacture. And the other thing that I got super excited about when I left the agency the first time in 2001, there were a handful of primes. There wasn't this like renaissance within technology and this bubbling cauldron of excitement within private funds. And now we have small startups launching small sats into low Earth orbit. and the opportunity for folks to build upon a market that is adjacent to NASA, where NASA is no longer the commercial place in tech development, for me is super exciting. And so that's where we're going to start to push our success measures, are like, how well are we partnering and thinking about the outside of the gate development, so that we are spending the government's money in a wise way to de-risk technology that will help this burgeoning space economy.
Yeah, great to hear about the partnerships and how you think about the public versus private capital and bringing the right parties on the table. And I'd love to hear from Bill on some success stories from you too. Obviously, we've all heard about this little thing called the internet from DARPA side of things, but
yeah, you're welcome, and we're sorry. So yeah, and there's certainly other big success stories, some of them related to space, but there's like GPS is a good example. But I can at least tell you a few things that I've seen during my tenure. And being a DARPA PM is very much like what's that wabi-sabi, planting seeds for trees whose shade you will not enjoy. And so I am enjoying the shade of some trees that program managers before me planted. And so there were a couple of stories I can share. One of them is a company called Embody, and they were part of a program called Atoms to Products. And this is nothing to do with space, but it gives you at least some of the story. And the thesis behind that program was that we needed a new approach for scaling nanotechnology. And that we could do it in a couple of different steps, by building capabilities at the small scale, the medium scale, and the large scale, and then, in terms of length scales, and then in terms of throughput, trying to optimize those to work together to get to large scale. And they came to the table with a really nice idea for scaling collagen fibrils, and for using kind of a scaled nano collagen material for like an ACL replacement, tendons in the body. And this worked fantastic. They had this electrospinning idea, and fast forward many years hence, when I came on the scene, they had demonstrated the fundamental technology. They had materials, they were in some animal testing. But they needed to get into FDA trials, and they needed to get to scale. And that's where we were able to put together an SBIR program, just a direct to phase 2 that allowed them specifically to do that and to work with an embedded entrepreneur. And now they have an FDA approved product on the market. And as an avid skier, I'm anticipating taking advantage of this. So, depending on how aggressive I get on the slopes. And there's a few other examples that I can give. The InkBit company, they started out as a startup out of MIT, and we're really thinking about, how 3D printing and the precision associated with 3D printing, and how you can have precision at scale. And they had a vision, kind of a machine vision approach. And they were successful in doing that. And that was really entirely through the SBIR program. There was no other DARPA program that preceded that one that I'm aware of. And they've just closed their second or third round of VC funding, and they have a big, huge building full of printers, and they're making medical and other soft printed 3D printed goods.
This is great to hear. We got an audience question here also on, obviously we have entrepreneurs listening. How do you think about working with partners outside of the United States? How does it work? Is it possible? Is it not possible?
So do you want me to take it or
Sure, go for it.
Okay. Well, DARPA has the mandate to work with the smartest people around the world. And obviously we take very, very good care of national security information, and we think very, very, very carefully about the rules of engagement. But we work with people around the world. I don't know about the SBIR program in particular. That may be limited to U.S. companies. But in terms of the overall DARPA, I mean, I work with folks in a variety of countries, and it's fantastic because you get this, these alternative perspectives that really shake things up.
How about you, Jason?
Yeah, we are limited to because our monies are awarded on contract as opposed to NSF, who uses a grant mechanism, and you have to be a registered business within the U.S. And majority owned by a citizen. So that is a limit.
Got it. That's helpful. That's helpful to know. Going back to the kind of entrepreneurial side of things here, and as we talked about success stories, when you look at the proposals coming in and applicants coming in, how do you think about this balance, or when do you think about it in terms of like the technical skill set or research skill set versus the entrepreneurial skill set? Is there a balance? When does the balance shift? If it shifts, how do you think about it?
I'll take a run at that first. Again, we're a little unique, I think, within the government SBIR, STTR ecosystem, in that we are asking for technologies that are driving NASA's mission forward. And because we don't have the scale and size of the warfighter in the DoD context, there's just a fairly limited, if someone's building a piece of hardware, there's fairly limited opportunity or application to build numbers of units. And so it presents a particularly unique case in that we are also, as a program, designed to spur the national economy and seed commercial success. And so the way the program is designed, with phase one as being a feasibility study, we're not necessarily expecting someone to have their commercial plan worked out at that point. Like, maybe they do, maybe they have identified that they've got a solution and there are alternate markets that they're serving. That's not a critical determinant for us at that point. We also offer a program that's supported by NSF called I-Core, which is designed to help the small business owners start to think about market. And so we really encourage our companies that are coming in, likely a couple of successful students out of a university, or a professor has no business experience. Like, we do want to provide skill development around that area. What does a market look like? How do you write a business plan? These kinds of things that are going to enable them to be successful. That's offered in our phase one, which is a 6-month period. And then the phase ones that get selected for phase two, part of what you're doing in your phase one is starting to think about what that commercial market might look like. Because again, our measure is we want to see the businesses going through our pipeline and getting leverage, external resources, whether it's NASA or not. And so you really start to need to have a commercial plan at phase two. And then certainly in our post-phase two activities, that's like a critical component. And we have a full-blown commercial review of proposals. So not an absolute requirement at phase one. Always nice if that's where you're thinking, but we don't necessarily expect it. Within that phase one process, starting to think about that, getting some skill development as an offering if needed. And then like moving down through the pipe, like that's when we're going to start to really need folks to be thinking about that commercial component, because at the end of the day, that's really what we're trying to do. There are other NASA mechanisms to fund idea development, but we're really looking for small businesses thriving and contributing to the overall economy.
And Bill, from your side, go ahead. Sorry.
That's a great answer. Obviously, I'm a program manager and I touch on the SBIR efforts, but I don't run the office. So I really appreciate that perspective. I think it's very consistent with what our folks here at DARPA would say. There's a few things that I can probably add. I mean, so certainly if you're going to go into business, you do have to have something to sell. And so there has to be a technology that is going to be of relevance to someone, that someone has to be willing to pay for it. And so you really do need both. And I find that it is the weaker proposals and the weaker kind of performers haven't really thought through the business side from the beginning. And it does help to think that through. What's your path? What's your strategy? How are you going to go and test that market? And with what capability and with what dollars, and then what kind of people do you need to go do that? The people side is also very important. And another thing that I would just suggest, is to try to be as quantitative as possible, particularly in the space area. I have read a lot of proposals, and there is a propensity for folks to be very qualitative. And at DARPA, we really need to see that quantitative argument for what really is the difference that you're going to make if you're successful, and it's a system level difference, or it's a mission level difference, and connecting the dots between the great technical work that you want to do and how the end user is going to really benefit from that. And if you're doing, if you want to go into business, then how does that connect out to what you think of as at least a nominally viable business picture? I think that's pretty important. And I don't see enough of it. I'd love to encourage more.
Yeah, no, that's very, very insightful. In your selection process, do you at some point kind of engage private capital early on? Is that a factor? I know Jason mentioned that you want to see co-investment in level like a phase 2, phase 3 level. But is that a factor, or when does it become a factor?
There's no set answer, of course, right? Because every technology is its own little special snowflake and has to be thought of in the context of its market and the problem it's trying to solve. Having said that, we do recognize that there is a lot of variability in when those needs come to the table, and there's not a one size fits all. And so that's why we developed this embedded entrepreneur program to try to. It sounds a little similar actually to the ICAR program, where we really try to sit somebody at that small company, or it's not a small fraction of their time. It's like 75% of their time is spent thinking about that problem, and charting that path.
Great, and we have an audience question here in terms of moving, just not looking at small business, but looking at mid-sized business, and that SBIR has been a powerhouse for NASA de-risking tech, but we are also seeing that there is a need for an SBIR type program that supports mid-sized businesses on the same model of SBIR phase 1 and phase 2. What do you think about the mid-sized businesses?
You want to take a shot at that? Or?
Yeah, why don't you run with that first, Bill?
Well, I would call that, just our normal DARPA programs. I mean, quite frankly, we have, these are at the scale and with the right kind of goals to enable a mid-size business. And, quite frankly, a lot of the performers on my programs are mid-size businesses. It does depend on what you're doing. So I'm in the Defense Sciences Office, and we're doing things that are a little more fundamental, but we're also if you like, farther back in the technology ecosystem. So we're working on materials and components and individual technologies that can be combined eventually into a system. And that's where those sort of small and mid-sized businesses tend to play. So we spend a fair amount of time with with that community. So I don't particularly see a need, for some special carve out. If you're between 500 and 1,500 employees, then you can apply for this program. If you're quantitative, if you answer the Heilmeier questions, if you don't know what those are, feel free to email me and I'll send them to you. And think about the end user, then you've got a good shot if you have something to bring to the table to help solve the challenges that we're posing.
For SBIR, we're limited to 500 employees or less, so that's the definition of the small business. There's definitely small business set aside, so that encouraging primes to work with small business. But as a mission-driven agency, we seek, as many good, fresh ideas as possible, and put out solicitations to seek companies to deliver on those. I'm not sure I totally. I don't have enough data to understand the need of the mid-size business if it's actually a breakdown in the system. So I can't really speak to that in an effective way, because I just don't know if that's really a big problem. I haven't heard that before. So it's something I could potentially look at, but we really are focused at 500 employees or less as a program that's congressionally mandated and what the SBA definition is. So I really can't speak beyond that at this point.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks, Bill. And so we have Murali back now on, and I wanted to kind of circle back a little bit on some of the focus areas on NSF side of things, and how do you think about the key areas of where NSF can be successful in supporting early stage and small enterprise in the space industry side? And also, kind of one more catch-up question is, like, how do you think about the balance of the scientific and technical insight versus the entrepreneurial nature of it?
Yeah, I mean, to answer that question, can everybody hear me now? I hope so.
Yep.
Yes.
All right. To answer that question is that I think it's important to recognize that the NSF program is very broad, and we don't really focus on any one piece of technology in any area. In terms of the technology areas that I take care of, like I mentioned, it's robotics and wireless and IoT and space. Again, there is really nothing that we want or seek or looking for. And so it's up to the small company to come up with any idea that they have. It doesn't even matter if it's not in the areas that we cover. It's still all right. So so that's how it is in almost all we have about 15, 20 technology areas listed out on the website, but it really doesn't matter what technology that a small company is pursuing, as long as there is high technical risk. That's the only condition. And of course, it's got to be a small business. And usually the kinds of companies that we see in general are very, very small. It's one or two people companies just starting out. So that's one. The other, maybe I should mention that the size of the program is a relatively small program because it's a percentage of the research budget of the agency. And so it's about 210 million right now that we have in the SBIR STTR program. And with that, we are able to support, on average, about 350 or so companies every year. And like I said, they don't come back. So it's all new companies every year for the most part, except that there is this phase 1, phase 2 that they have to go through, or that's available. Just to give you an idea of the size of the awards, the phase 1 is right now a little more than $250,000, and the phase 2 is $1 million. And then we have all these other supplements that you have to show there's some traction in the market or some interest from private equity or a larger company, for instance, can also qualify. And so those supplements also add up to about $1 million. So you're not talking small change here for a small company. It could add up to $2.5 million for the company, along with the phase 1, phase 2, and the supplements. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, because we really don't focus on any particular area. I mean, if you look at the website for space technologies, for example, you'll see about, I don't know, I think if I recall correctly, there are about 11 general topic areas, but that they cover the entire space technology area. So it's not that we're looking for anything specific.
No, that's helpful to get to know in terms of the context. And you mentioned that there is like, I think it was 1.3 billion or so recently, like all just monthly capital raising success data. Where have you seen some of the successful companies? What's a couple of the success stories, perhaps?
Yeah.
Well,
So
we
are
can
you
get a better
talking
feel
of this?
for it.
Sorry,
Space.
are you talking of the space
Yeah.
part of the portfolio?
Yeah.
It takes a while for these companies to get going. So, like I mentioned, we have had only about 3 years of experience with the space topic. But one company stands out in the space area is Swarm Technologies. So that company has been raising quite a bit of money. They were funded about three years ago. One of the first companies that we funded, and so it's like you could communicate or send messages or data or whatever from any part of the world at any time. So there's a bunch of, I think, the total will they plan to put 150 satellites in low Earth orbit. Not yet there. And these are very tiny satellites. They're like, 15 centimeters by 15 centimeters and 2.5 width, 2.5 centimeters. So they're very tiny. But they get the job done, and they have lots of customers and lots of investment, maybe tens of millions of dollars already. And they're still in the phase 2 stage with the NSF program. So that we would consider, a kind of success. But there are many other examples in other areas of technology. But in space, this is about the only one so far, because it takes time, and we've been around only for 3 years.
Got it. No, that's very helpful in terms of insight. There is question also in terms of infrastructure side of things here. There is a question in terms of focus on areas like spaceports and payload processing. Is that something which is falls into any of the kind of focus areas you're working on?
Yeah. Are you asking me, Sven?
Asking to all of you.
All of us.
Yeah.
Okay. So I can go ahead and try and answer that. Yeah. So we, like I said, because it's broad solicitation, we go anything from resource extraction on the moon to launch vehicles of all kinds, satellites of all kinds, sizes, and then of course manufacturing in space. I have about right now about I would say 30 or so companies in the portfolio in space technologies, about 30, and they're all over what I just mentioned, areas that I just mentioned. Everything from propulsion to launch vehicles to kind of maybe I can't think of any that is actually using this International Space Station, though. There may be one or two. And then there's quite a bit of activity in low Earth orbit. Those kinds of things also we're funding quite a bit at this time for telecommunications.
I'll jump in. I'm not sure that Bill would have much there, but and I'll give a shout out to Jeff Bingham back at the War Room days when we were fighting for Space Station back in '94. Great question. Absolutely. So as I mentioned, NASA draws its needs from our mission directorates as well as the NASA field centers. Kennedy Space Center, which has done a remarkable job in reinventing itself and really servicing the private sector. There's definitely topic areas that are focused on infrastructure and processing to support launch. So that's certainly something that we see a bunch of technology being developed in.
Bill, I think you're on a mute.
Thank you. I think the only thing I can add is just, DARPA is about disruptive technology. And if we say, the internet is infrastructure, which it certainly is now, then that's an example. But, if there's a special insight that you have in terms of enabling infrastructure to do more, much, much more than we can today, and really enable new capability, then we're interested. And we would certainly look at that very carefully.
Great. And now we're done just for a few minutes here. And then just last question from my side is, and then personally, to all panelists, what excites you about the space currently, and what's exciting to you about it? Who wants to go first?
2 words. It's getting cool again. Okay, that was more than 2 words, but it's really getting cool again. I think young people are excited, and just this new ecosystem is fantastic. And I felt like we struggled for a while, but we're coming back.
Yeah, I would add to what Bill is saying, about the kinds of problems the Earth as an ecosystem as a whole we are running into. Of course, obviously, climate change and so on. I think there's no better place to look at Earth from space than any place else, right? And so we can do. There are lots of companies that are looking at the Earth as a whole ecosystem and trying to figure out what can be done. So I think it's very exciting that there will be solutions to climate change, or at least to know the extent of it around the world. And if you know, then we can do something about it, right? So I think that part is exciting.
Yeah, a couple things get me really excited, particularly with SBIR and STTR, is the opportunity that as a program, we sit between the NASA technical need for exploration missions and small business capability. And so we have the ability to impact a diversity of businesses. So when we look at societal issues and equity, we as a program have a mandate and a capability to jump in and address that in a meaningful way. We also, as an agency, are focused on issues such as climate change and human exploration and aviation, understanding the origins of life and the universe. And so being able to bring that NASA technical need to a commercial private sector focus, also super exciting. And then finally, I alluded to it, like when I left NASA in 2001, again, that was such a different world. 20 years ago, the way the industry has changed, and the opportunities that young startups have to impact and influence what happens in low Earth orbit and beyond. We've got 8 small businesses on Mars currently helping with that mission. So like the opportunity that is available for small businesses to meaningfully impact our exploration activities and be a part of the mission and actually see this ecosystem of possibility really growing and flourishing. And for me to actually be able to say, I want to work with private sector investment, venture finance, and partner to figure out how do we make sure that our SBIR and STTR investments are incentivizing in the right ways. Like that's a whole new world, and super excited by the opportunity that we have to do that together.
This is a great note to end with. It is. I really truly appreciate you guys all attending the panel today. There is a lot of exciting innovation. There's a lot of focus on small enterprise and opportunities. And thank you all. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Jennifer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you to our moderators, Sven, and all of our panelists, Dr. Nair, Mr. Kessler, and Dr. Carter. The work you do is so important to the work we do in microgravity. All right. Now we'll take a 30-minute break for our exhibitor palooza. Take a walk, grab a snack, and go visit our sponsors at their virtual booths. When you're ready to attend the next session, click the button under the panel session title in the Attendee Hub. See you in 30.